I think otherwise, I don't know, Steve, if you have any updates from your end.
I'll be brief. I'm looking forward to your presentation. I've seen, I think, one of your videos online, so I'm looking forward to your progress. We have a FHIR server called the Helios FHIR server, and we have, I'd say, a version 1 implementation of the SQL on FHIR specifications implemented. We're using it for some data analytics projects currently for specific clients, and also just using it to explore interesting data analytics use cases that some of our clients bring up with us, mostly in the laboratory test space. And we're working on sort of a version 2 and beyond after that, taking what we've learned from these sessions and looking to enhance the product in various ways, either making it more performant or more flexible along the lines of what John has been doing relative to Parquet and FHIR. So yeah, we're an active participant in the group, and we always learn something every time we join in one of these sessions. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Cool. So I think, the rest of the session, we could have a little bit of show and tell. We have two show and tells, which is exciting, one from Bartek and one from Gene. So, definitely this is being recorded. So, happy to share it around or have you guys share it around. It's all open. So you can, provide this to others and, get some interest in your projects. So I think with that, maybe I'll shut up, but we have, a decent amount of time. So, I think, you can go into a little bit of depth of what you're doing, both you, Bartek and Gene. So yeah, maybe let's say maybe around 15 minutes, let's starting point, and then, maybe we'll shift over to Gene, but we can handle it naturally. So yeah, if there's nothing else, let me hand it over to you, Bartek, and maybe
Yeah,
introduce yourself a little bit to the crew.
yeah, sure. About me, firstly, I'd like to say that I'm very happy to join the meeting. Thanks, Arjun, for the last meeting that we had. And also thanks to John for the initial feedback regarding the Fireboard, which I would like to present to you today. Introducing myself, I've been in tech industry for over 15 years, fully commercially for about 10, I would say. And in my daily work, I actually function in several roles, sometimes as a backend engineer, sometimes as a solutions architect, sometimes as a health interoperability expert. The last role is relatively new for me, so I'm still learning a lot also from you guys, from your presentations or publications in the internet. And one of the areas I've been exploring more deeply recently is FHIR. Also because of projects we've been implementing at the company I'm working for. And the interesting thing here is that the companies we most talk to are our startups with small budgets and always tight timelines. The FHIR standard isn't always the best fit for them, but just knowing it already provides a lot of hours and helps advise clients on tailored solutions, sometimes using only a small fragment of the huge FHIR standard. So that's enough. I think that's enough about me. And now I'd like to tell you the background of how this project idea came about. I mean, Fireboard. It was born during the online conference Analytics on FHIR. It was somewhere in October last year, probably. And one of the things that has been presented there was Dan's presentation about FlatQuack project. And I remember Dan did a great job during the live demo. That's always something that terrifies me personally, making a live demo, Anyway, I found it super interesting. I was very new at that time in this SQL on FHIR world. Tested the library and thought, what if we could provide a visual interface that would use the library that Dan created behind the scenes. As I mentioned, I didn't know much about SQL and FHIR at the time and thought it might be a nice way to explore the topic, learn by doing. So let me share the screen. Yeah, that one. Can you see the screen with GitHub? Yeah, okay, great. I'm going to go through this video that is available on the GitHub Fireboard. It will be easier due to the time and to avoid any during doing the live demo. So to start, I will add that an important idea here is one-click deployment, at least locally, by running the Docker compose command, which is visible here. The entire configuration is done automatically, and you can start using the application. The second note is the layout is super basic, but that wasn't the main point of this application. And also I am the backend engineer, so please forgive me. And what we see at the beginning when we on the screen is the view of the analytical case. And I don't know if that's the best name, but that's what we called it for now. From the meeting with Arjun, I know that something similar is on your roadmap. I mean, grouping the view definitions into the cases, analytical cases. I don't know what is the proper name. This might be real world cases such as the distribution of vaccinated patients or queries identifying healthcare gaps, for example. Within one case, we can define all the necessary view definitions that are needed for this purpose. And for each individual view definition, what we can do, generate query, and under the hood, the FlatQuack library is used. So we translate view definitions into a query to the DuckDB database. And ultimately, it would be nice to have the ability to choose a database, for example, ClickHouse. But for that, we would need to have available implementation of the view runners, for example, for the ClickHouse. And once ago,
can you hold for 1 second? Can you just zoom in? It's quite small on screen.
Is it better right now?
Yep, that's much better. All right.
Oh,
please continue. Right. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. But a few months ago, there was nothing like that for ClickHouse, and we just use the dance library under the hood. That is translating the view definitions into DuckDB. The second thing, running the query, and it's run on NDJSON files to which the path can be set separately for each analytical case. Currently, to be honest, it's not very useful. It makes the most sense with local execution, where we can easily put export files in the appropriate directory. And again, ultimately, we'd like to add support for file uploads or the ability to specify a location, for example, to S3 or any other external data storage. Both DuckDB and ClickHouse have support for running queries on these data storages. So I think it could be useful. And the third thing that we can do with each individual view definition is saving and opening it in Superset. Probably you all know Superset tool. It's very common, used by people who do analytic stuff. And Fireboard is integrated under the hood with a superset via API, thanks to which we can easily visualize the results of a single query in various ways that you can see right now. So this is the DuckDB query that was generated by FlatQuack library. We can run this query, we can see those results as a table, and obviously we can do all of the stuff that people could do with data, like creating charts or something like that. And so the idea here was to make it the most convenient as we can. Yes, and the last thing I would like to discuss regarding the analytical case and all of the view definitions defined within the case is saving all of them as views. I've seen the greatest value here in the combination of this data, and using this functionality, we save all queries as views in the database, and then the name of each view is the name of the view definition that you can see here. Here is the name of view definition. It's got from here actually. So once we have all of them saved as views, we can, I just paste here, previously prepared the query that combines data from all of the tables And using that, we can actually run the query for the data that we are seeking for. And here is, for example, distribution of vaccinated patients. So for that, we needed patient resource, immunization resource, and there was something else probably. Yeah, but this is actually all that you can do with view definitions and analytical cases. And maybe not the last thing, but one of the last things that I would like to discuss is creating new analytical case. Currently, the form is very simple. You need to provide only the name, description, and export path that I mentioned previously. But I see the possibility here of implementing integration with one of the LLMs. So that based on the description of the analytical case, all view definitions would be created automatically. And I believe that this functionality would definitely simplify the work of the work on FHIR data for analytical teams. They could focus on actual analysis, on working with SQL that they know very well, without having to dig into the FHIR standard or SQL on FHIR. Of course, the manual editing process would be still possible, but the first version would be generated automatically. So that's one idea here behind the process of generating new analysis. And as for the future roadmap and our ideas that we had in the company when we were discussing this tool, and I didn't mention yet, is the ability to share entire analytical cases between users. Fireboard could become a sort of repository, a place where users can keep both private and public analytical cases. And this functionality actually is partially already available on the current demo page, where for each unique session, so when you just enter the page, the new session is created, we create a unique link and a unique account in Superset. Such a link can be passed to anyone, and you can, and by that, you can share your analytical cases with other people. Of course, this is very naive implementation because currently there is no control over who can make. So it's more to show a potential direction of the development in the future. So that's all for the demo. And I'm very curious, guys, what you think. I also really encourage you to check the GitHub, because in the GitHub we had some issues already created. It was the way of providing our ideas for the future roadmap. For sure, not all of them are provided here, but it's just a raw view of our thinking about this tool and potential use cases, potential missings in current version. But yeah, that's all I think for now.
All right. Well, thanks very much for sharing, Bartek. And it's really great to see folks like yourself and your team, taking and picking up the work, moving it forward in different ways. Wanted to see if I have a couple of questions, but John, Steve, do you have any questions for Bartek and about Fireboard?
Yeah. So first one is when you take the source FHIR data in bulk format, I guess, and run a view runner over it, do you then persist the views at all, or is that just a sort of in-memory view? Or is there any value in persisting it for performance purposes?
Yeah, as I remember, I ran this issue during the development, and if I remember correctly, and if my understanding of how DuckDB database works, it wasn't possible to create views and save them in memory version of DuckDB. So we persist the database files in our storage. I think it answers to your question.
And what sort of file format do you use to persist them?
We just we just use DuckDB way of running it, because there are two options there, in memory and persistent. So when we run DuckDB database in persistent way, it saves the database file into the storage with the extension just DuckDB. So it's how we handle this under the hood.
Okay.
So yeah, all of the data are stored in just one file handled by the DuckDB under the hood.
One more question, if I'm allowed it. Well, it's more of a comment actually. So on the LLM side of things, so you're talking about using LLMs to generate view definitions effectively. I've had a think about this, and I actually built something that works pretty well, that actually attacks it from a different perspective, because I observed that LLMs are very good at generating SQL in a variety of dialects over simple schemas. They're not as good at doing something like creating a view definition from FHIR. So what I did was I created a MCP server. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with what an MCP server is. It stands for Model Context Protocol. It's a way of providing connectivity from an LLM to an external tool, and the API sort of advertises a bunch of tools and prompts around what those tools are meant for, and then the the LLM uses its tool use functionality to invoke those and all the rest. So what I did was I created a tool that basically exposes SQL access to a set of view definitions, or an analytical case as you're referring to it. And it has the ability to run arbitrary read-only SQL over that. So what I did was I used pathling. So pathling can take, say, a bulk export, turn it into a set of Spark SQL views, right? And the LLM knows how to write Spark SQL. So this tool says, okay, here's the data set for, mimic for ED patients, 2018 to 2022 or whatever. And I can ask it, how many people got sepsis when they were in hospital or whatever, and it will know, okay, I've got a tool for that, and it will write, and it knows what the views look like. And in a way, the view definitions become the prompt. So the view definition, each of the view definitions has their own description. Each of the columns can have an arbitrary description. So you can be as descriptive as you want in the semantics of the data, and that will help the LLM to know the best way to query that. And whether that's Spark SQL or DuckDB SQL or ClickHouse SQL or whatever it is, it already knows how to write SQL in whatever sort of dialect you want. So I found that kind of worked pretty well. But yes, it would be also nice for it to be able to just write the view definitions for us. But I found that it probably needs additional fine-tuning or prompting to be able to do that reliably. And there's some nuances with that.
Yes, definitely. We had a lot of discussions internally, because we have our internal AI machine learning team, but those guys unfortunately were not so available at the time. So we only briefly discussed potential solutions for this problem. And yeah, I remember that they mentioned exactly the same that you mentioned a moment ago: fine-tuning and additional prompting. That there is no such easy way just to ask the LLM to create a view definition or set of view definitions that cover exactly my use case. So yeah, that your approach is probably easier in that terms and works better. But by the way, is it available anywhere on GitHub, or is it your private product?
Not yet, but it's my intention to open source it eventually. But to your point about the view definitions, so I think that the view definitions need not be completely use case specific. Like there is a element of reusability there. So for example, if you took, US core, or actually I'll stop using US core, it's a bad example. But like if I took Australian core, I can actually, make a set of view definitions that basically exposes almost all the information in any AU core compliant FHIR server as a set of simple tables. And given that, the LLM can actually just pluck out what it needs in most cases without me necessarily having to create like some sort of cut down use case specific set of views for that. So I think the vision eventually is that, every implementation guide comes with a set of views that just give you a simple rendering of that information, and you can just, and your analytic tools can be aware of those already because someone else wrote them. And of course, you can make views that refine that or create better, more use case specific views of that. But as a baseline, you can get to the data via SQL, and maybe the LLM can do the last mile there.
So you think that it would be possible to have a common set of view definitions for each, let's say, in national implementation of FHIR, like for Australia, for example? That could be is it an intention of any future work within this group to have such a common set, or not?
I don't think it's the intention of this group to be the ones that author those things, but I think it's totally possible. I think the more general the implementation guide, the more tricky it becomes. So AU Core, for example, is reasonably simple and small, and it's pretty possible, but it's maybe more useful on maybe the level down from national implementation guide. But yeah, I think it's very possible, and you're probably looking at constrained view anyway. So maybe it's something like pathology results. Like maybe I want to do like something around antimicrobial resistance, and I only really care about pathology side of things, maybe some patient demographics, et cetera. But I think it's very possible to make sets of views, and we're still searching for the best name for this, that go along with implementation guides and and that are sort of highly reusable. I think definitely.
Yeah, if I were to add to that, Bartek, well, firstly, stay tuned for next week because it's going to do some demos that definitely touch upon this work and this conversation, particularly around LLMs, and I won't spoil it, but LLMs plus SQL on FHIR, which is, something a lot of people have done experiments, not a lot, but, a number of people have done experiments on, and, that's a really exciting area for development. So I'm looking forward to seeing that develop. Then shout out to Gene as well, who doing a lot of writing right now. Look him up on LinkedIn. He just wrote about the model protocol for LLMs too. So I'm looking into that, looking into learning more about that as well. So that's number one. So stay tuned for next week. Number two, yeah, the idea that, we've discussed it a bunch as a group, but, inherently creating a view definition of a FHIR resource, is kind of like a profile in the sense that you're making these decisions, right? Like you're deciding on the flattening, you're deciding on the subset. And so, our first thought was like, okay, well, maybe we can make these kind of just super generic view definitions that they'll be sort of one for these large standards like US core. I think we've moved away from that idea as a group more towards what John is saying, where sort of the more that the standard or the IG provides, scopes down or limits the world of things you can do in FHIR, I think then the view definition representation that makes sense, right, will be really useful for people, goes up. right? Like John was saying, of the, if you have microbiology, like it's a really tight set, what, code systems you want to use, know what demographics are important. So nobody's really none of us have really, I think, tackled this or really explored this space. So, if that's something that you or others would be interested in, we'd love to see it. Where we're sort of at right now is sort of more use case driven. That's something that you certainly want Gene to be helping us out with, because he has a lot of great context on that, where, we take these specific use cases and say, okay, here's a standard. Let's create a set of view definitions. Like, for instance, it's already an IG publisher for sort of display purposes, but for semantic purposes, and create sets of view definitions for specific use cases, at least as a demonstration, right? And then how official these are, we're not here to say this is how you do, there's other channels and vehicles for that, for saying, okay, well, these are the view definitions that we bless for, our microbiology IG or whatever. So what I think we can do is support the development of those view definitions. And then, thirdly, we've talked about this, Bartek, but, starting to think about what does that analytical case object look like? What is that? I really like this idea, the idea of a portable, interoperable, analysis object, right, is a really cool one. So that's something that, yeah, I'd love a bunch of folks to get together and work on that. That also brings in ideas of what a query resource would look like in FHIR, and then what a query resource that's portable looks like in FHIR too. So I think you kind of need that as a foundation before you start building these collections, right, or kind of, a package of this. So right now we've just been talking about these ideas. So, there's a lot of space for you or anybody to kind of take them on at this point, but we think we definitely see value in them and want to support them and promote them.
Yeah, great. Thank you for your insights. I don't know a lot about query object that you mentioned previously. Is there any information somewhere or previous discussions regarding this topic? Because that sounds interesting, and I am curious. I would like to get more into that one. I don't know where I can find the information potentially.
Yeah, nothing formal. We just discussed it on the call. So if you search in the channel, you might see some discussion about it. There's a post or two about it, but yeah, nobody's really taken it on to the stage beyond that. Yeah, the concept is we want some way to, represent the query side, right? So we're representing these portable views, right, and flattening. Similarly, we want to represent portable queries, and there's a couple of approaches there, I think, but ultimately that query should meet that view, right, in some kind of data system. And there are definitely dialect issues that are one of the main reasons why SQL on FHIR exists. So there's, for whatever reason, even though there's a standard, there's way too much variability in SQL dialects. So a query resource, in my mind, would have to be very inherently multi-dialect or sort of expandable in some sense, right? And it's maybe starting from, one dialect to others. I know there's a couple of SQL processor things that could be potentially interesting here, but I don't think it should necessarily be tied to a specific tool set. But yeah, that's where we're at with that. Definitely a really interesting area that something like Fireboard could help be a demonstrator for sure. John?
Yeah, the other way of thinking about it is that one of the sort of motivating principles behind SQL and FHIR is that if you can provide a mechanism for creating simple views, you can have much simpler SQL on the other side that queries it. So because now I don't have to deal with all sorts of complicated structures, I can really stick to really simple SQL statements. So what you could do is you could say, well, what if you constrained SQL right down to not only just ANSI SQL, but like a subset of ANSI SQL that we know is possible to run consistently over a really wide range of database engines? And what if you said, okay, well, here's like a query resource, and as a constraint on that, you can put SQL in here, but it has to be really simple SQL according to like this subset or whatever. And then you could pass this around and you could reliably run that SQL over the results of view definitions. So then you've got this pairing of view definitions that can produce really simple flat tables from FHIR. And then the next step of sort of taking those view definitions and combining them and doing further processing and transforming things into other things. You could potentially, if it was useful to distribute those as well, which people might need in addition to the view definitions to do more complex things, then this is kind of a way of doing that. That's kind of the concept in my mind.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. We probably shouldn't, we definitely want to stick with SQL and not go down the road of constructing our own special healthcare specific FHIR query language, because there's a lot of those already, which we don't need. But no, yeah, that's definitely one approach. I'm always like, I see it as, I can see it as both in some sense, because that creating that subset and deciding where that subset lies could be, I know we've talked about it before, but could be quite difficult. So I can kind of see that as one capability, and then potentially like sort of specialization, right? It's like, I know that, this translation into this dialect is going to be helpful for me, something like that. Having a little bit of openness there that's implementation specific, right? Kind of like hints, I can use this optimized form or whatever. But, ultimately, I think it'll be, and I think none of this sounds infeasible to me. I think we just have to kind of sit down and put our heads together and write up something. But yeah, that package itself, I think would be really interesting as an artifact. It could potentially, become commercial property too, right? So that's an interesting aspect. Another aspect I was thinking of was combining it with like data itself too, right? So you can think of like it even in a testing scenario, you have view definitions, you have the queries, and then you have the input data and you have the expected output as well. So it could be used as a kind of a testing mechanism, to prove this, reliability and replicability over lots of systems. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting directions. So I need to find some time to start putting them down, because I think it's just an exciting idea, right? Like it's not the only next stage, but I think it's a really cool next stage for this area of work.
Yeah, the other thing that we've been working on, Bartek, is an API so that a FHIR server can know about view definitions. It can tell you what view definitions it knows about. It can have these sets of view definitions known to it. It can potentially run view definitions against its own data as well. So I'm kind of working on this sort of concept to bring that all together, because imagine if you could have this app that could know about a whole bunch of different FHIR servers, and it could, talk to those FHIR servers. It could extract data from those FHIR servers. It could see what view definitions those FHIR servers know about, or it could give them view definitions that the user supplies. You could let the user sort of define cohorts of patients that they're interested in, which in turn turns into a view definition and can be executed against these servers. Even if the servers don't support like executing a view definition, you could potentially get an export and then run a view runner over that export. And you could effectively have this tool which allows you to discover data and bespoke extracts from particular cohorts of patients from multiple different servers. And the key part is the multiple different servers is because once you figure out what data you want, you can potentially get that from multiple sources because you've got a standard way of describing those views, right? So that's kind of the demonstrator I'm trying to create to bring together SQL on FHIR and bulk data export and the SQL on FHIR API and how that can sort of enable this sort of ecosystem of FHIR-enabled servers feeding into analytics. Yeah, so I'm not sure if we'll get that far, but I'm working with Nikolai on some of that for his presentation at Dev Day.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of cool work. I know we're coming up on some time, so wanted to wrap things up a little bit. Yeah, I think this is a really great discussion, and we definitely appreciate you, joining the group and developing Fireboard. So yeah, we're really excited about this, and again, we'd love to see you be a part of it. I know we've discussed it, so let's continue to figure out how you can integrate with the group. Like I said, I think I told you that a bunch of folks will be in Madrid at the Connectathon. A lot of us won't be there, but there'll definitely be a bunch of folks. There's going to be a birds of feather session. We're finalizing the timing right now, but that's relatively close to you. So if you guys can make it, that'd be great. And then, a bunch of us will be at Dev Days as well. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of good content on SQL on FHIR Dev Days. So highly recommended.
Yeah, thank you. I really hope for some further insights from you if you can find time and to tell about the future direction that we could go with the Fireboard, or what kind of features that would be useful. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from this kind of discussion. I already understand that there's no simple answer about the future direction. This is what I understood actually from this. But yeah, general feedback regarding the tool, that would be very, very useful for me and also for the company, because probably we would be interested in participating in this group and also participating in developing this part of FHIR standard. So yeah, I really enjoy. I really hope for your insight as the experts of this area.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we appreciate that. And like I said, we're a really open group. So please reach out to the broader group, post in Zulip. Just get to know folks that way. It's really very casual, and continue to come to the meetings. Happy to help connect you with folks, and just the more people who know about you and your work, the more connections you can make. But yeah, we're here to support each other. So yeah, happy to help that continue.
Good job, Bartek.
Yeah, nice work.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
All right. We'll close it off for today, and thank you, Bartek. And so Gene hopefully will be able to make it next week, and we'll see another sort of take from somebody new to the group. So, all right. If there's nothing else, we'll call it a day.
All right. See you guys later.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.